Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Do the Research, Land the Job, Using Inspire to Improve the Job Search. My name is Courtney Brown, and I'm the Southeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be your host and question moderator today. Our presenter this morning is George Bergstrom, Southwest Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. To register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. Both George and I will be watching that to make sure those questions get answered. There should also be some time near the end for questions. This session is about an hour, so you'll get one TLEU for today. After the presentation is ended, please stay logged in to download your TLEU. If you're watching an archived recording of this webinar, instructions on how to obtain your TLEU are in the video's description on YouTube. If at any point during the webinar you are experiencing any sound issues, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box on the left side of the screen. If there's a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat box. So now I will turn the presentation over to George.
And I have now been with the State Library about a year, really enjoying it. But a lot of today's content comes from my experience in academic libraries. But I feel, and talking with public librarians and others across the state, I feel that this can be really valuable for everyone. Is everyone hearing me okay? I just want to get one last confirmation to make sure. Go ahead and type that in the chat box. Perfect. I see some. Awesome. Okay, so today I'll give a very brief background of kind of where this stuff comes from and, of course, how you can hopefully apply it to your libraries. We'll then talk about the various types of research, both career research, job searching, and some other things. And then hopefully we'll have time for some examples and questions. All right. So, as I said, this kind of started when I was in, this idea kind of was first born when I was in academics. I started at Purdue University kind of spring of 2006, and at the same time, my supervisor started almost exactly the same time. So we were both kind of learning the campus at the same time. And we discovered not only does Purdue have, or at that time had 13 libraries, but it also had over 30 career centers. And so really just trying to understand that structure led us each, both individually and together, to lots of meetings with lots of people. And when it came to the career service folks, we found several occasions where they were paying for resources which libraries and librarians would consider traditional library resources to help the students sort of prepare for their job search. So we very quickly decided we had to get committees formed and work groups and whatever to not only stop double and in one case triple paying for resources, but also to sort of work more collaboratively with those groups. And it also very quickly became clear that a lot of the skills that librarians, especially in business-focused programs, so whether it's in a college or whether you're helping your patrons with business-related issues in your public library, those are the same kind of skills that we were teaching those students were very similar to either what the Career Center staff were teaching, soon-to-be graduates, and so the synergies just sort of snowballed from there. So what I wanted to talk about today are sort of the various situations we might find ourselves in as we work in libraries. So obviously, one is if you're working with someone who's looking for either a first job or maybe a first sort of career path. Another might be someone who's got a job or has work in some fashion, but they either want to change their situation or they want to grow in that job or career. And then lastly, we would have folks who are either unemployed and just need something, or the underemployed. And obviously, in all of these situations, we're going to be relying on the skills many of us learned in school, or maybe we've honed over years in the profession, that at least when I was in school was taught as the reference interview. Okay, so in that first situation, the unknown career or job, if they've really not thought about what they want to do, we have a great resource in Indiana, in Inspire, the Testing and Education Reference Center. Hopefully most of you have used it. I kind of put this screenshot here as a placeholder in case the internet doesn't work, although it was working for me just before we started. So I may come back to this and talk about it if in a second the link doesn't want to work for me. But obviously, for those of you who either haven't used it recently or maybe haven't utilized it as much as the ways I'm talking about today, there is just a vast amount of information here. Obviously, from what we're talking about right now, people who don't know what they want to do or are unsure about a career or a job, all the way to prep tests for things from careers to colleges to beyond. And then both U.S. residents as well as international focused people. So if I have to, we'll jump back to this, but first I want to try here. And it looks like it is going to work for us. Perfect. Oh, nope, error. Lovely. Oh well. Good thing we can just do this the old-fashioned way, right? So as I go super quickly, and I know YouTube is going to hate me, I'm just in Inspire and I'm going to open up Testing and Education Reference Center. Okay, there we go. So obviously they have an assistant who would love to help, but I'm going to ignore that. If we have someone who doesn't know what they're interested in, the career section is sort of a great place to start. If they need sort of career advice, and this is kind of how I would help a patron, they can get to either a virtual library, which is very similar to a free resource I'm going to talk about in a moment, or they can go through some career assessment type tests. They usually don't take long, and they are interest-based. So you're going to describe the types of things you either like to do or are good at, and it's going to try to match you with careers or jobs you might want to learn more about. And I gotta say, when I first heard about these, I was skeptical about them, but they're usually pretty accurate. The last couple of times I've used them, both in this resource and in others, they almost always identified skills such as helping others and organization and all the types of skills that obviously we need as librarians. So even though they didn't come out and say, you should be a librarian, they identified many of the key traits that are associated with librarianship. So I do like most of these assessments. And then whether you take the assessment or not, if you go into the virtual career library, you will learn about, here we go, wade through all this. Oh, goody, I do have to create an account. Okay, well, we're not going to go through that today, but you will learn about various broad career categories and the types of skills and training needed in those categories. So again, very useful if you're working with someone who doesn't know what type of job or career they're interested in, or doesn't know much about it and would like to learn more. Okay. So we'll minimize out of that and go back to the PowerPoint. And then, as I said, they've got other tools which can be pretty useful in here, practice tests for all sorts of career and education related tests that can be useful, the general skills help. So if you have people, whether it's for a job or not, whether they need basic math help, English help, writing, things like that. As I said, there's just a really, really wide array of resources here that can all help um, our users who are looking to either find their first job or are unsure of what direction to take. Okay. So, other resources that you could use are things like the Occupational Outlook Handbook. Hopefully everyone's heard of that. This is a governmental resource, so it can be hard to read sometimes, but it basically does something very similar to what we were just seeing, or what I was just describing in Turk. It will describe careers and career paths and tell you things like what education is required, what the basic job functions are. And so if you've done one of those skills assessments, or if you have an idea of what you're interested in, it can be really valuable to learn more about it. And the other nice thing about that tool is that because it is put together by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the federal government, it also tries to give you an outlook on the expected growth or lack of growth in certain career fields. So that can be really useful. And then a third resource for this type of user would be Career Onestop. And we will open that one up really quickly. And this, similar to the other two, can allow someone to sort of start from the beginning and explore careers and career paths. So they have their own assessments, obviously. They do the profiles, similar to the Occupational Outlook Handbook and the virtual career library in Turk. And then they can help you do some planning things. So 3 tools that can help in that situation where you have someone who's kind of unsure of the job they want to pursue or the career they might be interested in. Also in Inspire are things like the Vocational and Career Collection and the Vocational Studies Primer. Now, I gotta say, these are both designed for college students. Now, they're both designed for sort of right on the cusp between high school and college, and they're more article-focused databases. But they can be another good source of learning about a career or a job or what it takes to do a certain type of job if you have the user who's maybe completely clueless. Okay. So if they have no idea, those are the places I would start. If you are working with patrons who do have some idea, and before I dive into that level of research, I just kind of wanted to highlight this, then you're going to want them to think a little bit strategically about not only what they already know, but what they maybe need to find out. And this is something that I'm not sure if it originated with the people I worked with at Purdue, but they used it heavily. And it's sort of the foundation of business or company research, is that you can't ignore any point on this triangle. And when working with college students, now at 3 or 4 different colleges, especially who just sort of are, I'm about to graduate, I want to find a job, they'll see a list of employers that's coming to the area, or maybe they hear about a job fair. And if you're lucky, they might visit the website of someone who they're interested in. So basically, it's like deciding on a major life event and only consulting one piece of information. And I used to joke with them, you know, would everyone in the class want to give me all the money they had in their, you know, wallets, pockets, bags, purses, whatever, and let me invest it for the class if I only consulted the company's website? And especially when it's business students, but even when it's not business students, they usually see the flaw of that investment strategy, right? We can think to Enron, we can think to WorldCom, we can think to dozens, if not hundreds of examples of companies that were about to have a really hard time financially, who were still out there on their websites and in their press literature saying, hey, we're fine, invest your money in our company. So when you're doing this type of research, especially if you want the best picture and want to present yourself in those interviews well, you do need to consult things that the company puts out. So things like their press releases, their history, their product literature, their websites, and annual reports if they're a publicly traded company. But you also want to look at and maybe do a tiny bit of research about the industry they're in. You know, is it an industry like auto manufacturing, which maybe is about to go into hard times if less and less of us are going to buy cars as things like Uber and Lyft become more and more prevalent? Or is it an industry like, and I'm not sure what they're calling themselves yet, but the fake meat industry, where they realize we can't produce enough, beef, etc., and we're going to have to start growing stuff in the lab, and maybe that industry is growing. Or, as I just saw the other day on the news, is it something as boring and mundane as the cardboard industry, which, because of all the things that are delivered to our houses every day, is probably a pretty growth industry right now. So they need to do a little bit of research there, or at least they should if they want to get the best advantage on the job search. And they probably also want to do just a little bit in what we still hope are third-party sort of objective sources, typically thought of as news sources. So your Wall Street Journals, your Washington Posts, your New York Times, whatever. And obviously there are thousands and thousands of those that make up that segment. And we've got a couple of great databases in Inspire that are built just for that. Okay. So if they already know one, either the career or job they're interested in or the company they're interested in, there are some similar things we're going to be looking at. So obviously, we can still consult some of the ones we've already talked about. Sorry. I just caught something there. America's Career Infonet is now Career Onestop, which we already looked at. So I will correct that before these slides go up. But some of those same resources we've already looked at, if they know the career they're interested in, then instead of using those as exploratory tools, now they're using them as sort of checkpoints. Do they have the education that the Occupational Outlook Handbook says is required? Do they have the skills and the temperament that those assessments in either Career Onestop or Testing and Education Reference Centers say are important for the job? And if they know, again, career or company, you might want to use a resource like Business Source Complete. And so I don't want to spend too much time on sort of Boolean searching and the actual how to search. But what I want to mention in a database like this is you can find out tremendous information about any of those, from any of those 3 points on the triangle. So obviously, if I was interested in the auto industry and I had my eyes on a particular company, I would want to look for something like this, a SWOT analysis. Now, if I was in a live class, I'd ask who knows what that means. If you do, you can type it in the chat. But basically, that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that is sort of an analysis that either the company themselves should be doing on a regular basis, or in this case, typically third-party analysts are doing about the company. Oops, didn't hit the PDF. But these can be great documents if you've got someone who's aiming at a company large enough to have had one of these done. And obviously they're not done on every company in existence, but when you can find one, this little chart is sort of the gold mine. It identifies in a few bullet points what either the analyst, if it's done by a third party, or the company themselves think of as their strengths. It bullet points what's been identified as the potential weakness, etc., etc. And how I always encourage students to use these, and I would encourage any user, is if you can find something like this on a company you're interested in, you could look at those opportunities or threats, or possibly even the weaknesses, and you could tie your background and skills to the job you're applying for, and then how you could either help them succeed in those opportunities, help them stave off that threat, or how you could help them improve on that weakness. So obviously, in an example like this, I probably can't go in as a single person and tell Ford that I can correct all their product recall problems, but I hope you guys kind of see what I'm talking about. Okay. Another way you could use Business Source Complete, of course, is if you just looked for the industry. And actually, before I change the search string, I'll kind of point out over here in the source types, I could just limit just to industry profiles, just to market research, and many others that would help, just a SWOT analysis, as I saw there, that might help a user, a patron, tackle this kind of research. So again, if I just want to know about the state of the automotive industry in the United States, now this is a little bit dated. I would obviously be doing more Boolean here if I was going to be helping someone do this. But I could tackle learning about that industry in the geographic area, etc. And then lastly, how we could do this, obviously, is we could put limiters in there about specific news sources. So another great example I used a lot in classes was, and please keep in mind that this was like early 2000s, if you had searched without very many limiters in a database like this for Caterpillar, which of course there was a Caterpillar near Purdue plant, you probably would have seen gloom and doom news reports. If you put on the geographic limiters and only searched in Indiana or in the West Lafayette area, you would have gotten very different coverage, because at that time Caterpillar was having some labor issues. And so without very many limiters in a database like this, you probably would have gotten national or international coverage. And since their headquarters is in Illinois, you're not going to learn, or you're going to learn more about company-wide information, whereas if you had focused near where the person is searching, obviously in West Lafayette being in Indiana, an at-will state work environment, and so there were not as many labor issues at the plant near Purdue. So just things that we probably all have done before, that we learned in school, that if we're helping out a patron, we might want to highlight for them, show them how to do some of these advanced search features. And I would actually use that same example potentially from the flipped perspective, is that if they limited too much and only learned about the location that they might hope to work for someday, that could help in the job interview. But if you didn't also get a little bit of news from wherever the headquarters of the company is, assuming it's a company large enough to have more than one location, you might not learn about the health of the company and those labor issues. So this kind of searching can be done both ways, depending on what they already know, and sort of guiding them through just sort of a basic journal search or article search. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Obviously, Business Wire News is very similar. And then, as we said, when we know the career or job, we can use those resources listed there. Okay. So, finally, if they do happen to know all of it, it's really just about bringing all of those pieces together. So, if you're lucky enough to be helping someone who comes into the library and says, you know, I want to be a accountant at the Caterpillar plant in West Lafayette, Indiana. You can make sure they understand everything it takes and involved in being an accountant. You can help walk them through searching about, Caterpillar, and then the heavy equipment manufacturing industry and all those things, um, helping them bring it together. And then to tie a bow on it, obviously, if they have not done that yet, we saw in Testing Education Resource Center, there are some resume tools in there. There are other tools that can help them produce those documents that they may need. Um, is there anything someone wants to see or some examples that might want me to focus on as we move forward here? Any questions before I jump out of this? Okay. Are we all so cold that we're frozen to our seats? All right. Well, then I guess I will just... Oh, here we go. How about get in the trade? Oh, sorry, I didn't quite see the whole thing. Something about trade.
The question is, how about getting in the trades and testing for electricians?
Sure. So for something like that, I would definitely look at what is in, Turk, and then I could compare that to what's in Career Onestop. If they either don't have access to the full Inspire or the trades. Okay, so as maybe some of you saw here, there are, let me go ahead and I think if I click on this one, there are resources for various trades in here. And I believe in the actual testing, I thought there was one specific to electricians, but maybe not. But there are practice tests for some of these as well. So that's another big thing, that there are plenty of careers out there that do have certifications, do have testing requirements. And so this can be a great first stop. I know those are the books that disappear off shelves the fastest, whether it's for ACT, SAT, postal exam, anything like that. I remember the days of shelving and not shelving those sorts of materials. So if they know a specific trade, obviously I would come in here, see if it's in here, because this one will have, again, more of these online exams and resource materials. Foreign services, cosmetology, nursing, postal, real estate, but yeah, I don't see specifically electrician. So if the trade or career path or the job that the person you're helping wasn't in here, that's when I would probably look at Career Onestop. And then they've, of course, got searching and here we go. And then we've got great great backgrounds, um, a nice summary, but then you've got, videos on those various jobs and careers and paths. Oh wow, it looks like they've even integrated job postings. Cool. So that's how I would start with them. And then somewhere, what they should have, why am I not seeing it? Plenty of videos. But they should then give you the nice big summary. If they've taken that away, which I'm not seeing right now, so I'm not going to keep looking, then I would maybe jump back into Occupational Outlook Handbook, because that will then have a much more textual sort of article description. Oh wait, maybe it's here. Learn more about the career. Aha, there we go. And so, you'll learn about numbers. You'll learn about, projections of, is it a growing industry or not? You see our nice little salary thing here, the types of education required, a breakdown in the workforce. So obviously for electricians, it looks like the largest portion do have bachelors, but there are also a pretty large number that don't. And then the very importance of apprenticeships and learning more about that, and the types of knowledge they should have if they want that job. So there is a lot here. And we could probably spend a half an hour more just exploring this one career path. So that's where I would probably have to do a balance of what is in a resource through Inspire, which might give you just a little bit more depth, but on not as many careers, and it'll definitely give you the practice material, which you wouldn't get through Career Onestop. But obviously it doesn't have as many paths. So if you're not finding it there, that's when I would jump into one of those free resources. Great question.
George, we have a question. Any
Sure.
CDL information?
CDL? Let's see. I thought I'd seen that in here before, but I am, unless it's in the virtual library, which apparently wants me to create an account, which I don't want to bore you all with right now. Resume writing, SAT, etc. Yeah, I am not seeing it in testing and education, so I thought there was. But a resource like this may describe the various tests involved, and it might link out to other sources on the web. The only thing I guess I would caution on is, because this is a free resource, it's either going to be limited in what they can give you, or they're going to have to link to paid sources if they don't have it. Oh, and one thing I will say about this, as it says here, this is sponsored by the Department of Labor, the government, so almost all of the data in here is actually free governmental data. But the government finally realized that they have a terrible time designing websites that are usable. And so all of that labor data, which would have given us, these numbers here on growth and salaries, etc., but they just were never in a great way to present that data clearly. And obviously a nonprofit like this, which can solely devote its time to it, has developed some pretty good techniques for doing that. And one thing I will note, which is, maybe I can get it from Seymour, there's, like any website, there are multiple ways to get it. Yep, here we go. Is that you can get some of that data. Okay, no, I bet I could do it this way, but it takes too long. So you can, in the toolkit, under, where'd they move it? There. Oh, I just saw it. Under Salary Finder. No, nope, they did do it here. You can put in a zip code usually, and then you can compare national numbers to your local area. Well, it used to be zip code. Maybe if I... So what is Indianapolis 4? Someone help me out. I don't live in Indy.
6204.
6204. Thank you. I could do Louisville. There we go. And so electricians in the Indianapolis, Carmel, etc. metro area are better than the national average at the low end, better in the middle, but not as good on the high end. That's kind of interesting. And then obviously I could break this down to hourly if I was not lucky enough to get a full-time job. So again, all kinds of really cool sources out there, both in Inspire and not in Inspire, that can be used to build a really strong picture of what a person would need to do to not only acquire the job. So again, all of the background information in here would if they really dug into it, would talk about what types of knowledge and skills they either should have before applying or that they will start to develop after getting the job. But it'll tell them about the educations that are preferred and the various apprenticeships that might be involved. And then once they've got the job, obviously you can use some of these resources to negotiate, salaries, benefits, whatever. This tool definitely has that kind of information in it. So any other questions? Do we want to pick a different career path?
I'm just going to jump in here. Someone mentioned that the B&B should have CDL resources. And then actually put a couple links in the chat box. There is the title list from TURF as well as the practice test. So that'll be helpful.
Yeah. One of the both really good things, but also can be the downsides of Inspire is we have so much in there. It's hard for any one of us to master it all. So it does not shock me that it was in there somewhere. Okay. So any other questions about a specific career path? Do we want to see any more tricks in EBSCO searching or interview prep?
We're waiting for questions to come in here. Someone did ask, will you share the PowerPoint and chat list after the webinar? And the answer to that is yes. The PowerPoint will be available.
It will definitely be available. And the recording, I'm not going to promise before the holiday, but I will definitely do my best to get the recording up soon. And then it'll probably go on our archived page probably in January. And that will also have the PowerPoint.
Someone asked about interview prep.
Sure. So I look at interview prep. Well, let's go to back to Turk. And I don't remember if they actually have anything. Okay. The virtual library should have something. And obviously, depending on what aspect of interviewing, resume building, and English and math skills. But for interview prep, I look at it a couple of ways. First, if they've done this type of research, even at the most cursory level, they should have a better understanding and ability to connect their background with the job they're searching for. So hopefully, or the job they're interviewing for. So I mean, again, hopefully they've read the job description, not only of their specific job, but of others in the same sort of field. They've, if at all possible, they've maybe done what's called an informational interview, either while still in school or maybe as they're debating a certain career path or a certain job. So learn from people who are in the role, maybe not at the same company, maybe at others, what it takes to do that. And then in a resource like this, even if there's nothing specifically in here that says interview tool, they will, by learning about the profiles of the various positions and what's expected, they will hopefully be able to prepare for an interview better. But a last thing, which I can always add to the PowerPoint and link to it for after the fact, but a last tool that they could look at is a category of tool. Oh shoot, the name just completely left my brain. But it's actually sort of like a social network where people upload or supply the interview questions they have gotten when interviewing for specific companies and in specific roles. And so then that's a search. It has become a searchable database of probably thousands, if not tens of thousands or more questions for many jobs and careers. Now, I will caution that something like that is user-driven, so we have to trust that they gave a fairly accurate representation of the question. And I have not used very many of those to sort of do a spot check of, hey, did they get it right for librarianship, which is more or less the only types of job interviews I've ever gone on. So that's one route to take, obviously. And again, a resource like this might not call it, hey, here's interview question advice and tips, but definitely by doing that research, they are hopefully preparing themselves for the types of things that would be asked. And I will definitely find that other tool I was just talking about, high school freshmen and in college. Yeah. It's definitely something that's going to become a bigger thing, as assuming the Department of Ed sticks with this path, but if they stick with the idea of our high schools kind of grooming students, at least in a broad sense, for a certain path. I think more and more school librarians for sure, and probably more and more public librarians will get, questions and people kind of exploring and hoping to learn about these paths. So whether it's one of the tools in Inspire we talked about, or whether it's one of these free tools on the web, it's probably the type of thing we're going to be seeing more of. All right, well, I'm going to slip back over to the PowerPoint unless oops, and it lost my place. Oh well. I think we were mostly through all this. Oh yeah, so I'll kind of go back to this. Obviously, just as a recap, inside of a tool like Business Source Premier, you can get original sources from the company itself in the form of their press releases and their product literature. And if they're publicly traded, you can get their some annual report type information. Although for things like that, you'd probably have to go to the SEC website if you didn't have a bigger database that colleges would have. You can obviously get some of those industry analyses, overviews of the market, etc. If it's a job or career that's well, they all have an industry that they're in, but whether it's in a database like that, but most of them are. And then we kind of glossed over it because that is the research and the searching that is much more traditional to librarianship, but obviously getting them to do just a basic news search uh, about either the job itself, the company, the industry, um, and the resources. So we've already had most of our questions, it looks like, but I'll kind of leave this up for a few seconds just to see if there's any last questions. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump back into Adobe. We're going to stop sharing. I can see how would LinkedIn. Oh, well, there. Yeah, LinkedIn would be a good resource, and it's not the social network obviously that I was thinking of, but that's another aspect of this kind of research. That would be a great tool for those informational interviews. You could try to connect with someone in LinkedIn who has a role similar to what you're aiming for. Another great way that I've seen career service employees promote LinkedIn is that you just by scanning profiles of people who have the job you're looking for, you'll kind of see patterns of, either presentations or things they've produced. If it's that type of a job, the educational backgrounds that are common among people who hold that role. So yeah, LinkedIn can be a great source as well. All right, well, while we're waiting for any last questions, I'll jump over to the LEU screen since it looks like we're winding down. Thank you. Yes, thank you, everyone. All right, well, I definitely want to thank everyone for joining today. My email's down here at the bottom. As Courtney said, we'll get the PowerPoint up and the recording will be available at the latest by January for anyone who wants to review this. And if anyone has any questions, definitely send them my way between now and then. And don't forget to download the LEU.